At all of our symposia, we address the issue of how are we going to pay for this new and exciting future. Innovation in every aspect of food production, delivery, and consumption is certain, and the question of finance will impact every part of the chain. Today, our chair, Chris Tucker, is going to lead a discussion with his panel of finance experts about the financing and investing in the future of food. Chris?
Can everybody hear me? Excellent. All right. Meet Steve and Brandon. Give them a round of applause for showing up. They haven't done anything yet. So every year we do this, we always like to have a discussion around investment. It's kind of a truism that the future is shaped by how we allocate the next dollar, right? It could be our next dollar as a consumer, it could be the next tax dollar, it could be the next investment dollar, but kind of the direction that the world goes is based on the things that we collectively somehow choose to invest in. And it's always a decision like, how do we talk about investment? So this year we decided to bring in some venture capitalists, like bona fide actual venture capitalists, who are actually investing in the future of food. And the niche we decided to kind of go down, though I'm pretty sure we're going to go off script a few times, is the future of alternative proteins. Is that fair? That's kind of y'all's, most of your niche? Yeah. And you've heard quite a bit of discussion, certainly yesterday, with the kinds of things that are happening that could kind of undermine the cow economy. Is that the term they were using? And possibly even lead to the end of domesticated animals altogether. You never know. Everybody has their different projections. But first of all, it's going to be based on how we actually, what we invest in going into the future. If you could put up the first slide. I think we have a slide. There's some slides, right? So I'm just going to frame this. I cheated and pulled a couple images out of my book, just to remind everybody that humans evolved on this place called Earth, and Earth is composed of a bunch of ecosystems or ecoregions. They're each very unique, right? Specific plants and animals, specific singular flows of water, elevation, climatology, et cetera. And there used to only be, a million years ago, like a million of us. That was it. You kind of indecipherable. You couldn't even find humans really on a map in any meaningful way. If you could put the next slide up. You may have seen, last week or this week, we just turned 8 billion, right? So after humanity being on the planet for 1.5 million years, this is what we've done to it. Right, the squiggly lines are roads. The red are, densely populated areas. The purple are toxic sites. The yellow are dead zones in the ocean. And then those big black smudges, kind of across Eurasia and the United States, China, India. Those are intensively farmed, agricultural areas. So those ecosystems that you once saw, right? This is kind of what we've done to it. Good, bad, and different, right? We're humans, we do what we do, but this is where we are. And if you go to the next slide. And this is how we think about food. This is how we think about agriculture, right? These aren't inherent zones. It was, after we populated the entire planet, right? Humans weren't on the entire planet. We got to the planet 10,000 years ago, kind of invented agriculture. And then we started saying, hey, how do we think about the planet so that we can exploit it for agricultural purposes? Sorry, exploit's probably the wrong word, but harness it for agricultural purposes. Here's good places to take our domesticated animals that we just domesticated 10,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. Here's great places to grow wheat, et cetera, right? So all those ecosystems, and then you saw the human footprint. And here's how we think about this. So I just kind of wanted to put that as a frame because we're going to be investing new dollars that are going to reshape how we even think about this, right? So if you go to the next slide. So this was when I asked the guys, hey, how do you like to think about? How do you like to think about the geography of the future of alternative proteins? And I think it was Steve that brought this one up. Do you want to kind of talk about why is this important to you? How do you think about this?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, so it's great to be here, and awesome talk so far. The reason I brought this one up and why it's top of mind for me when I think about all protein and basically using our land resources efficiently is the basic gist of this is it takes the entire Earth's surface and it breaks it down into ultimately how much of it are we able to use, and then of what we're using, how efficiently are we producing calories, and then how much of that is protein. And the massive takeaway here is that we're not using our resources efficiently. And for us, at least my firm, our biggest thesis is in essence that in order to feed a growing population, we're going to need to shift how we produce food to be more efficient in order to feed a growing population. So this heavy reliance on industrial animal agriculture, while that's been what we've been using in our food system for the past century or two, that it has to shift, or we're just simply not going to meet the calorie demands that the population will require.
So how does this kind of thinking, does this animate the thesis of your firm? I mean, you go and raise capital, right, so that you can deploy capital, so that you can have new innovative companies that change the market and hopefully give you some financial return, right? So how much is like Earth, land use, how we're using the planet right now, how does that animate both of y'all's kind of investment thesis, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it kind of goes back to this general idea of our firm's mission. We are a mission-driven firm. Not every VC is a mission-driven venture capital firm, but we also have the mission side of things, and our mission is to facilitate the shift away from industrial animal agriculture. So I don't necessarily wake up and think only of land every day. I mostly think of how do we make the very, very difficult task of massive behavioral change in the food system. How do we make that easier? How do we facilitate that shift? So that's kind of what drives us. And the answer from an investment standpoint is it varies widely depending on the subsector within sustainable food and all protein.
Yeah, and well, great to meet you guys too. I'm Brandon from Blue8. And just to add on to Steve's point, I think the way we see it also is it's a demand and supply problem, right? You already have 50% of all habitable land dedicated to agriculture. Like Chris mentioned, we hit 8 billion a couple of days ago in terms of global population. The UN is forecasting us to hit 10 billion by 2050. So with that many more mouths to feed, they're forecasting 56% or close to 60% of more food production needed just to meet that. And if we're already dedicating this much amount of land to food, there's just not a sustainable way to extrapolate that to create more food. So that's why we're investing in the food technologies that we are today in order to bridge that supply gap.
Great. Next slide, please. So we've seen a lot of these over the past day and a half. 1.4 billion cows. And each of these, I think Antoinette kicked off the event looking at Carl Sauer's original maps from 75 years ago of where these different plants and animals were domesticated originally. But now they spread over the entire planet. So this is where all of our cows live. That's their footprint. Next slide. This is where our 980 million pigs are. And next slide. This is where our 19.6 billion chickens are. I'd like to point out, like, when there were 1 million, 10 million humans on the earth, there weren't 19.6 billion chickens, right? That's totally a human creation driven by the human enterprise. So, I mean, part of what you're trying to do is change the human enterprise, right? Mm-hmm. So each of these are kind of different challenges. I mean, beef's a different challenge from chicken, from pigs, eggs, dairy. Can you kind of talk about how, I mean, do you break it up like this in your thesis, or how do you make your investments to change this to a better future?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could start with that. Part of the answer is yes, we do think of it in terms of the type of animal and how it fits within the food system, but then we also think of it in terms of the type of business model of a traditional food company, and then the type of consumers that are out there. So there's no one size fits all where we say, if we want to rid the world of a need for chickens, of these 19.6 billion chickens, we can't just say, well, we're going to come up with one type of chicken alternative. It just doesn't work like that. And even if you just look at traditional chicken, there's not one type of chicken consumer, one type of chicken company. There's high-end, low-end, B2C, B2B, B2B2C. The food industry is very large and very dynamic, and I think I just saw a stat that it's roughly $1.7 trillion for the meat industry. I've seen usually lower, but yesterday I saw 1.7. So there's not going to be one solution within any of these companies that we invest in that just overnight fixes the chicken problem or fixes the beef problem. So we look for diversified solutions across everything that I just mentioned.
Brandon?
Yeah, and I think what's been interesting just looking at these maps is you do see production concentrated in certain regions. So I think for cows, obviously in the US and Brazil, chickens here, you're seeing a lot in China as well as pork, right, where more than 50% of all pork supply comes from China. And therein lies a lot of issues with resiliencies of the food supply chain moving forward. So with the pork supply chain, for example, with African swine fever, more than 1%, I think, of global pig population was affected in the year 2019 alone, causing a 1% drop in China's GDP. So I think these sort of factors we do take them into consideration certainly because of the economic implications that they are downstream. And to Steve's point, we are looking at new technologies to try to decentralize production in order to enable just-in-time manufacturing in consumption regions so that it's more equitable, it's also more economical, and ultimately more diverse.
Great. Next slide, please. So you guys put me onto this report from the Good Food Institute. Absolutely fascinating. Google it, download it, look at it, chock full of charts. First of all, it's very plain spoken, right? Plant-based meat, seafood, eggs, and dairy, right? Because we can talk all protein, but for me as a consumer, I consume dairy, I consume eggs, seafood, meat, and they all have completely different supply chains, implications, how they're grown, economics are different, and they kind of systematically deconstruct this in there. Can you talk a little bit maybe about Good Food Institute, when you've seen their analysis and others, and kind of where that's going? If you could go to the next slide, I just pulled some charts out of it. Like explosive change in investment in just the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. And right, it's just going to keep going up. Yep.
Possibly, yes.
Yeah. How do you guys think about this?
Yeah, happy to take it. So as you can see, right, $5 billion invested in the space last year. That, I believe, was more than half what was invested in the preceding 5 to 7 years. So a huge amount of investment coming to this space. And I think it's a function of both the fact that today's conversations, especially in food, are dominated by supply chain issues, right? First, we have the COVID impacts on a variety of supply chains worldwide, and then we have the Ukraine war, which is impacting food prices as well. So there's a big spotlight cast on food, and people are recognizing that food is a problem and is not going to go away unless we actively try to solve it with technology. And that leads us to the second point, which I really feel why it's such an interesting time for us to invest in food technology now, because there are many maturing technologies that are proving out that they will be able to tackle these problems head on. And happy to get into that later on too.
Yeah, great. Next slide. They kind of accumulate. This is kind of geographical, so I pulled this one. And what I found fascinating about this, right, is obviously Western Europe and North America, we have more resources, we have more money, so we're investing more in this sort of stuff. But if you go to the next slide, Asia Pacific for milk. And I get it, my Asian American friends, lactose intolerant, but there's a role for milk, and so they're way ahead on investment there. So how do you see the investment geographically? Who's taking the lead on what and where?
Yeah, I mean, from a geographic standpoint, it's kind of the investment dollars are flowing initially into the areas that you would expect from a market size standpoint. So when you look at the largest markets of global industrial animal agriculture products, so meat, dairy, eggs, that's where the dollars are starting with. So usually the first world countries, so the US, European countries, and now we're seeing a massive uptick in Asia. So from a geographic standpoint, that's where a lot of the companies have been initially popping up. But what's interesting is now there is a pretty noticeable shift over the past few years to countries where they're not massive animal agriculture producers or exporters, and it seemed to be from like a food security thing where there a lot of innovation is happening there. So whether it's in Singapore or Israel, some of the best companies that cross my desk on an annual basis are coming from those regions, because those countries have put dedicated policies in place led by some of their governments to focus on being more food secure, and they believe in alternative proteins as part of their future. So while a lot of it has been North America or Europe and increasingly Asia to start, I think we're going to see more countries come online that recognize the food security aspect of alternative proteins.
Yeah, exactly. And just to add on that, I think you are seeing increasing adoption for plant-based meats and alternatives in developed markets today, just because that's where the companies are, right? And also that's where there is the ability to afford some of these products, which are higher today, are priced higher today. It's always interesting to see the plant-based milk stats in terms of the Asia's adoption of it. And I can speak to that given I grew up in Singapore, and culturally, I would say plant-based milk or dairy alternatives have been consumed in the region for quite some time. So you have the soy milks, you have the almond milks, you have rice-based milks. So that's really what's responsible for that increased adoption on the plant-based milk side of things. But I think across both slides, you'll see that there is incredible amounts of room to grow. There is a lot of penetration that's still to be had within other regions of the world. And this is only plant-based alternatives that we're talking about today, right? So there are other alternatives that consumers have not been able to see yet, and they are coming to market in the next few years.
Next slide, please. So we mentioned Singapore a couple times, and you're from Singapore, and you've worked in Singapore on a lot of these issues. So I was reading an article about a month ago, and I forget the title, but it was something catchy like how the Dutch invented lab-based meat and why they're not allowed to eat it. Something like that. And it was all about how the there are Dutch scientists that really kind of pioneered a lot of this stuff, but the regulatory rules in Europe would not allow anybody to sell it, eat it. But Singapore, because they have 1% arable land, and they are food insecure in that geostrategically, and made a commitment recently to do something like be 30% food secure by 2025, I don't know what the date is, soon.
Yeah.
It turns out that Singapore just made the Dutch meat products, they approved them for use, and now the Dutch are working with the Singaporeans to change the face of alternative proteins. How do you think about all that?
No, exactly. I mean, so I actually was working in the government, and a big part of it was on the food security problem that we had. So we've been looking at this for the past few decades now, right? We are a small island nation, smaller than the size of New York City, but we do house 6 million people on that tiny island that you see, and we have less than 1% of arable land, like Chris mentioned. So we've been importing more than 90% of our food over the past few years. The grand target that the government has set is now a catchy campaign called 30 by 30. So by 2030, we'll require 30% of all our food production to be done onshore, and a lot of investment money is going behind that. So we're bringing all the companies that you can think of in terms of food technology, right? So some of these plant-based meats and dairy companies that we spoke about, some of these cell-based or lab-grown meats and seafood companies, all to make sure that we have production of food on an island where there's simply not enough land. And that's where all these technologies are able to unlock and solve this problem, because now you can create meat or seafood or milk in a manufacturing facility as opposed to needing vast amounts of land. And the other thing I would add would be, so Singapore has been on the forefront. We have approved the first cultivated meat product about 2 years ago. But this week, actually, there's been very exciting news in the US, right, where the FDA has also given no questions or the green light, essentially, to cultivated meat in the US. So very exciting times.
Yeah, huge sea change. Like, once it's legal, all sorts of things start happening, right?
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So this came up when we were having a discussion. We were talking about what are all these different kinds of investments? Like what kind of proteins can all these advanced technologies generate, and which market would it disrupt? And one of you kind of made the flippant comment about bluefin tuna in Japan, and I looked it up. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. 80% of all bluefin tuna goes directly to Japan, and like you disrupt that market, and it's an enormous thing.
Yep. Absolutely. And actually, it's a company that Steve and I share in our funds. Is a company called Blue Nalu, based out in San Diego. And they're producing cultivated seafood. So starting with bluefin tuna, they're taking the stem cells from the bluefin tuna, allowing it to proliferate and differentiate into the fat and muscle cells in order to produce that fatty piece of tuna, right? So a sashimi that you consume called otoro. So one of their biggest plans is to build a manufacturing facility right outside Tokyo. In order to feed what is the world's largest market for bluefin tuna. And once they're able to do that, it would be game changer, right? Producing a lot of food in a sustainable manner, also healthier and more nutritional for consumers without the mercury problems, the microplastics, or the pollutants that you're seeing in today's natural supply.
What other companies do you guys share in your portfolioes? Because one of you guys does early stage, one of you guys does
Do we share
later.
any others?
I think that was it for now, at least.
I think I think right now it's just Blue Nalu.
Yeah. So who does the later stage?
So we do the later stage, and
So you just watch what he's investing in and see how well he does, and then you make the money off of it. Check, got it. Next slide, please. So, again, cheating here, right? This is kind of the human footprint on Africa, but all the black smudge across the middle, right, is intensely cultivated agriculture there, and also around Lake Victoria in East Africa. We were kind of having a conversation about, and somebody actually talked about, I forget who it was, the latecomer advantage, right? I think, was it Moses that was talking about being the latecomers? There is an advantage to not having done all the things that America and Western Europe did in the 20th century to intensify agriculture, but there's going to be a doubling of population, in sub-Saharan Africa, over the next, couple of decades, a few decades, and so they're going to need protein. And I think one you brought up the story of Myanmar and cell phones, yep. Right? You want to?
Yeah. So I mean, the story that I was talking about is basically I took a trip to Myanmar a number of years ago, and while we were there, we were meeting with some large companies. One of them was a large telecommunications company, and they basically said that in that country it was really interesting because as an entire population, basically no one had access to telephones. They didn't have landlines. It wasn't part of their daily life. Unless you were very affluent, you just didn't have access to it. And then in the outside of their country, in other countries, basically the technology got so advanced with smartphones and cell phones that by the time the country was basically trying to provide access to telephones to the population, it was actually more feasible for them to just skip over ever having landlines, because creating that infrastructure to add in landlines wasn't necessary anymore. And it was really interesting because basically everyone went from no phones to smartphones and walking around with basically iPhones in their pockets. And we were talking about this in relation to food because I kind of brought up this idea that in a perfect world, which we don't know that this will happen, but in a perfect world where the new populations that are coming online, in addition to, plus the middle class, the rising middle class globally, it would be amazing if in the non-developed nations, if instead of ever having to go to industrial animal ag, they could just skip over that and go to some type of more sustainable alternative protein, kind of the similar way that residents in Myanmar skipped over ever having landlines and went going straight to smartphones. That's kind of a great idea. I would love for that to happen. There's a lot that needs to happen to make that even feasible, because we're talking about massive increases in the global population. So the infrastructure required for that, the supply chain required for that in alt protein is quite immense, and we're not quite there yet. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get the industry to that level so that those newer populations could just skip over ever having to have industrialized animal products, but that's TBD.
What kind of, when you look at kind of the case of Africa in the next few decades, what does your gut instinct tell you about the kinds of investments that would make that possible? Or, and I just put you on the spot, so you can say, I don't know, give me a day to think about it. I don't know, give me a day to think about it.
I don't know, yeah.
Next slide, we can come back to that. So there's a whole lingo around this stuff, and we've had a number of speakers talking about it, and this is just kind of a couple of the dimensions of it. Maybe you could kind of talk about the different language, the conceptual building blocks of alt protein market, and some of your cool favorite investments in it, the things you think will be most disruptive or, really change the future or maybe make somebody a lot of money and we can all invest in it now.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So this graph basically, or this chart, is showing in our minds one of the pillars within alternative proteins. So we think of alt protein overall as plant-based, cultivated, which is cell-based, and fermentation. So this is showing within fermentation, there's precision fermentation, biomass fermentation, and then traditional fermentation. So traditional fermentation has been around for a very, very long time. It's basically, we feed microbes, so yeast, E. coli, different types of microbes, some type of feedstock, and it naturally produces some type of product that it spits out. So we use this to ferment beer, we use this for cheese making, we use this for yogurt, and that's what traditional fermentation is. Precision fermentation is not necessarily a new technology, but it's a technology that is newly being applied to food. So this is the same idea as traditional fermentation, where you're still feeding a microbe some type of feedstock and it's going to spit something else out. But the difference here is now scientists are saying we are going to program this microbe and tell it what to spit out. So if normally it would spit out alcohols, we're saying don't spit out alcohols, spit out some type of animal protein, whether that be whey or casein, one of the types of casein proteins or lipids. And basically what this allows you to do is create real animal proteins without the animal. And then biomass fermentation is a separate kind of fermentation. The way that I think about it is really when you think of, most people think of mushrooms. Mushrooms are actually the fruiting body of a fungi. So the mycelium is the root structure within that. And that biomass fermentation is basically focusing on this root structure in essence. And you're growing edible biomass that's high in protein, high in fiber, and very, very nutritious. It's a whole food product. It's not plants because fungi are not plants and they're not animals. They're their separate kingdom. But that's a whole other area. And to your question about an interesting company, one of our companies is a precision fermentation company called Change Foods. They create real animal proteins, so real casein proteins and real lipids for the creation of cheese. So this is creating cheese that is identical to the real thing, just doesn't use any animals in the process. And then from a land use standpoint, the last stat that I saw them provide was that it uses roughly 25 times less land to produce the same amount of cheese with their process versus traditional animal agriculture.
Mm-hmm. And not 100% less land, because you actually have to feed that process something.
Yes.
If you go to the next slide, and Brandon, I didn't mean to cut you off, you may have something here, but you guys kind of brought this to my attention, right? There's all sorts of things that we still have to farm, to feed these processes, right? There's a feedstock. Yes. And it could be anything from seaweed to, all the way down. And everybody's kind of coming at this with their investment strategies in different ways to create milk or dairy replacements or egg replacements. Give me some more companies that are like, that when you look at this, what are cool companies that are taking something from the left and going to the right?
I think you should talk about
every,
right?
Exactly. So we spoke about the various pillars of food technology of alternative protein, right? So we started talking about plant-based foods. That's something that consumers are already seeing with the plant-based meat and dairy that you can buy in your Whole Foods. We talked about the cultivated seafood with the bluefin tuna example with Blue Nalu. And then now we're looking at precision fermentation where, there are still certain inputs that you need, and those were the inputs that you saw in the prior slide. So it's not magical, right? It's not something where it's going to appear out of thin air. So you do still need grow or to farm or to rear some of these inputs. And one of the companies that we have in our portfolio is called the Every Company. So they focus on producing the egg protein. So they use yeast to produce the egg protein, and you have the same exact bioidentical egg protein, and they're selling it to Kellogg's, to Grupo Bimbo, in order for them to use in their baked goods. So performs exactly like you would, just you don't need a chicken or you don't need the egg. You can produce it independent of the animal. So we always like to use that as an example, because in a very concrete way, you can take the animal out of the supply chain and also provide numerous benefits for both the businesses and the consumers alike. You're providing them a resilient supply chain with constant pricing, with constant quality, and from a consumer's perspective, you're giving them an alternative with no diseases, with increased nutrition, and also a stable price point.
Excellent.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think the last point about the stable price point, that is such a benefit to large food producers. So like to Brandon's point, the Every Company in his portfolio, they're producing albumin protein, so egg white protein. The volatility in egg prices over the recent past, or the past year especially, it's all over the place. And for a big food producer that's trying to keep their prices stable, not pass that on to the consumer, that's a nightmare. That's a nightmare scenario. So, and we just had a presentation on how the war in Ukraine was impacting wheat prices and just overall commodity prices. The precision fermentation approach or technology is one approach that could potentially eliminate or at least severely reduce volatility in pricing, which is better for end consumers at the end of the day. So it's a really exciting development for the food system.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and all of you should have your questions. We'll have about 7-8 minutes of questions, so start lining up. Next slide, please. So I like bacon, so I decided to end on bacon, but this is bacon made of mycelium, which is like, how weird and cool is that? But the reason I actually brought it up is you're not investing in vertical farming. We heard some questions earlier about vertical farming and urban farming, stuff like that. But like mycelium, in a way, is inherently an indoor farmed thing, right? They grow it in a dark, damp place. And we're talking about growing 3 million pounds of mycelium to start replacing bacon. You know, and there's multiple companies out there that are going after this. So there is this kind of overlap between like indoor farming and these facilities, and being able to grow some stuff. And I saw one chart that's kind of overlapping plant-based, cellular, and fermented, because they're all kind of feeding each other as these processes get more complex. So how do you see like something like this going down?
Yeah, I mean, so. This is actually a company called At Last. They were called At Last. They're called My Forest Foods now. But they're using a process called solid state fermentation. So to your point, they're creating bacon out of mycelium, which again is part of that biomass fermentation circle that we showed earlier. And I mean, I see this as one of the many solutions that are going to be needed in the food system to help create sustainable proteins. So. I wouldn't say we necessarily don't do vertical farming. For us, we haven't done a vertical farming play, but vertical farming for mushrooms might make sense. We don't like traditional vertical farming because it's focused on leafy greens. That's not an alternative protein. And also you're taking plants, taking them out of the sun, and then trying to recreate the sun inside. That's incredibly energy intensive. Vertical farming for mushrooms could be a totally different scenario where mushrooms need no sunlight or very little sunlight and just a damp environment, and then other conditions that are much easier to control. But that's just a long-winded way of saying I see this as one of the many potential solutions that we're going to need. There's no silver bullet out there. It's not like plant-based is the savior or precision fermentation is the savior. We need a lot alongside traditional innovation in traditional agriculture, like regenerative ag and organic farming, and a lot of the stuff that was talked about earlier. So it's all going to be part of a system that creates this shift.
Yeah, and we've actually invested in some CEA or controlled environment agriculture or vertical farming. But for us, it only makes sense when you're targeting specific types of produce, right? With leafy greens, from an economics perspective, at least today, it doesn't quite make sense given the energy usage that you'd have. But mycelium could be another option, right? Where if you don't need the same amount of energy, given that they can grow in dark, damp environments, it certainly is a potential opportunity. And the other thing, I know today's conference is about food, but mycelium does unlock other use cases too, right? In materials, in packaging, and you'll see many companies try to tame or use this wonder organism for a whole suite of different use cases.
Excellent. So we're going to open up to questions. Go ahead, Dean, and make sure to just throw out more examples of cool companies doing weird things that you've seen in the market. Dean.
Yeah, Steve and Brandon, great to see you here. Fascinating. So the happy theory about this so far is that this is a distributed production system, which means we're more locavore, we reduce the supply chain. But do you see some of these products quickly, rapidly shifting to a super scale? So now instead of a 50,000-foot little bioreactor, or maybe I'd like to buy up all the microbreweries and turn them into these bioreactors. But do you see that, no, to be competitive long term, it's going to go to 1 million square foot that's going to serve the Northeast or the Southeast, and are different products different? So what, is this going to be a locavore, or are we going to migrate back to the big, long supply chain just for scale economies?
Yeah, so happy to take that. I think it does depend on which specific technology we're talking about. So in terms of, and that has an impact on the timeline towards commercialization and how soon they are, right? So with precision fermentation, so that's what we spoke about earlier with the cheese production and also the egg protein production, they very much are on the cusp of this major commercialization in the next 2 to 3 years. So they are scaling up to larger and larger bioreactors. And what we're seeing is, I mean, the first initial facility will be something that's very much going to be providing for a specific region. I think they will try to exploit globally, but if they truly were to capture the global opportunity, they'll need multiple manufacturing facilities all over the world. So what these companies are targeting are perhaps one large major production facility in the Northeast here in the US, one also in Europe, one in Asia. So really decentralized, but also you do need to tap on the economies of scale. So that's a good point in order for it to make economic sense and for them to hit that cost parity with traditional offerings.
Your question, and actually, go. I want to get everybody in, so let's go.
Cole. You can call me Cole. Pronouns they, them, she, hers. I am also a recent graduate of Farm School NYC. So thank you. So I wanted you to, I guess there's kind of two questions in one. One of the things that you had said specifically was mentioning that producing less animal protein and having more plant-based protein would offset, and I'm paraphrasing, offsetting more food insecurity. I'm wondering, with the cost of processing plant-based protein and everything seeming a bit more expensive, how do you intend to work towards that? Because right now, like, plant-based meats are not cheap. Mm-hmm. So can you kind of articulate more on how that process would allow for more food insecurity?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's one that I think that's going to just simply take a lot of time, because what comes with startups is not price parity, it's not economies of scale, it is starting at a point where you're really initially selling to consumers who can afford whatever you're offering, and with the idea that as you scale up, you'll be able to get those economies of scale, bring those prices down, and I mean, it's a lot of it is simply a function of that, and I think that long term, it will have been a failure for all of alt protein, whether it be plant-based, cell-based, fermentation, doesn't matter. It'll be a failure if it really is just simply creating premium products for high-end consumers in first world countries. That's not what our firm is trying to help facilitate the change to. So it's a great question, and something that we're hopeful that it'll start bringing prices down and reaching the broader consumer base.
Next question.
Yeah, thanks. So with recent trends of like the companies that already control most of conventional meat production acquiring alternative, plant-based options, I'm just wondering about how you see all of the like benefits of getting rid of, conventional animal agriculture coming in tandem with the products you're investing in, and how you're working to ensure that you're not just contributing more food and that there is actually a trade-off, and like we do get the land back and can do more productive agriculture with it.
Yeah, happy to take the first stab at it. But I think what's important is, don't get us wrong, right? In the steady state, even the next 10, 20 years, animal agriculture as we know it today is still going to be a big part of the food supply. It's not going to go away overnight. What we are investing in is just that supplement to it in order to help bridge that food supply gap that we spoke about, where there's simply not enough food production for a growing global population. So you'll see a combination of all these various technologies alongside the traditional animal agriculture that you see today. I think what we need to make sure in unlocking new land, or in unlocking land with potentially reducing some of our animal-based agriculture, we need to make sure that we are using it or rehabilitating it or restoring it in a way that is good for the environment, right? That's good for the world, and not just being put back to other uses where ultimately it's not going to benefit us as a global society. So I think, all the food technologies that we're investing in today does give us a good chance and opportunity to reinvent some of the food supply chains in a way that is more equitable, more economical, better for the environment, and that's what we're all hoping and building towards.
Chairman's prerogative, one more question.
Hi, thank you. My name is Saya, and I wanted to thank you both for your presentation. It's really interesting. So my question is related to the health impacts long-term for the human species. You mentioned that vertical farming for plants wasn't something that you were in favor of because of the lack of real sunlight. And I can't help but think about the animals that actually eat the plants, so in some way they're also taking in that solar energy. And so I'm wondering if anyone is doing any research into whether or not these lab-created proteins can actually maintain intergenerational human health over the long term.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I'm the most qualified to answer that question. I think there's a lot of really good work being done at one of the organizations that was mentioned earlier. So the Good Food Institute, they have a fantastic team of researchers, scientists that are looking into everything from feasibility from a technical standpoint all the way to health. They did just do recently a webinar on the health. There was a very good study that was comparing the health benefit or the health effects of eating a certain diet on Beyond Meat, so specifically one of the main alt burgers out there, compared to 80-20 beef, and this was done over a period of 16 weeks, and they have a great webinar on that. So they are focusing on the health side of things, but we should absolutely be focusing on that. So this isn't just create protein, it's create food that is good for people, the planet, and animals.
Yeah.
One last statement, and then we're...
Exactly. Just to add on to that, I think it is a very important question that we ask ourselves every day, right? We don't want to create alternative foods that's not necessarily better or even on par with some of the traditional offerings today. So all data that we have today, that all the companies and all these think tanks are generating and scientific researchers, everything points towards that it is more nutritious for people. That being said, in a truly transparent manner, we haven't been able to test or conduct these longitudinal studies just because these alternatives have only come out in the past few years. Yep. So I think it's something that certainly we're all keeping an eye out, but there is huge, huge potential for the food.